Welcome to today's webinar titled Anger Management. We are thrilled to have Devin Sheehan with us today. Devin Sheehan studied at the University of West Georgia and holds a master's degree in psychology and a specialist degree in guidance and counseling. Over the past 20 years, she has worked with children, adults with a wide range of mental health issues in both outpatient and inpatient settings, and has volunteered as an equine therapist for service members, veterans, and their families. She currently works as the resource coordinator for the Military One Source program. Ms. Sheehan is the proud daughter of a former Army National Guard soldier and lives in the National Capital Region with her significant other, an active duty Marine. Without further delay, I will turn things over to Devin Sheehan.
Thank you very much, Stan, and as always, thank you to the members of our audience today. Before we begin, I do have a brief disclaimer to read to you. The appearance of hyperlinks does not constitute endorsement by the Department of Defense of this website or the information, products, or services contained therein. For other than authorized activities such as military exchanges and morale, welfare, and recreation sites, the Department of Defense does not exercise any editorial control over the information you may find at these locations. Such links are provided consistent with the stated purpose of this Department of Defense-sponsored webinar. Our objectives today during this webinar, we will be going over what anger is, what your anger style is, thinking about how often you become angry, which leads to our topic of self-awareness, how to keep track of your anger response, techniques for managing anger, and how to calm an angry person. What is anger? Even though we may look at anger as a remnant of what I like to refer to as the reactive lizard part of our brain, in the majority of cases, it's actually a normal, healthy, and adaptive emotion. All creatures, not just humans, use anger as a response to ward off an attack or a threat. And whether that response comes in the form of bared teeth, stomping feet, yelling, growling, bristling, spitting, some of us actually use all those forms just to make absolutely sure that the other creature knows that we're not happy, that it's important to listen to us. We feel agitated, and it may be in their best interest to be alert to our words and behavior. There are three components of anger: the physical reaction, increased heart rate or blood pressure, a flushed face, tightening muscles, neurochemical or hormonal responses, or an adrenaline dump. There's the cognitive reaction, how we perceive and think about what's making us angry. For example, the thoughts of the thing that happened to us is wrong, it's unfair, we don't deserve what just happened. And of course, the behavioral reaction, which is the way that we express our anger. There's a wide range of behavior that does signal anger, some of which we just mentioned earlier. We may look and sound angry, we may raise our voices, or we may actually clam up completely. We may turn red, slam a door, storm away, whatever we can use to signal to others that we're angry. Although anger is a normal response, uncontrolled or mismanaged anger does become destructive. It creates conflict in our relationships and makes it difficult for all parties who are involved in the situation to effectively communicate with one another. It can also lead to poor decision-making and problem-solving, and of course, as we know, it can even affect your health. As that anger draws out, as it persists, it impacts many of the body's systems: the cardiovascular system, the immune system, central nervous system, and digestive systems. And obviously, these are significant concerns. Now that we know what anger is, we'll look at what your particular anger style is. These are the 3 typical methods of handling anger, and while most people will primarily use one method, depending on the situation, the individuals who are involved in that situation or that conflict, as well as a number of other factors, sometimes other methods can be utilized. So if you are normally a turn-it-loose kind of a person, you may be at work, and it's not appropriate to just go ahead and let your anger out. So you may instead lock it up. So as you can see here, those anger styles are lock it up, turn it loose, and manage it. First, we're going to look at the lock it up style. This style is all about appearances. Underneath the anger, this is a typically passive individual, and they're frightened of their anger, of what they'll do if something happens and makes them angry and they let that anger out, as well as how people will view them if they let that anger out. The lock it up angry person will withdraw emotionally and sometimes physically. They'll become anxious because they're trying very hard to not appear angry. They may use the silent treatment, or, of course, their favorite phrase, everything's fine, everything's okay, why are you asking, if somebody asks them if something's wrong. What are some of the reasons behind this particular style? Well, they may have actually been punished in the past for being angry or displaying anger. For example, a young child may be told it's not ladylike to be angry, stop being angry. Or they may perceive that an outward sign of anger is a weakness that other people will exploit. They may believe or have been told that anger is a childish emotion, and once they become an adult, it's no longer appropriate for them to express their anger. They fear loss of control, and once again, for the Bruce Banners out there, people won't like me if I become angry. They won't like what happens. Our next anger style is turn it loose. For this particular style, these are typically more aggressive individuals. They're not concerned about appearances or what other people think of them. They want to let that anger flag fly proudly, and everybody around them is going to know that they are mad. Their anger is very rarely proportional to the trigger of their anger. So a small incident will lead to sudden outbursts of anger that aren't really connected to what's going on in the moment. And they often don't see anything wrong with their behavior. That behavior includes blowing up at others, shouting and swearing, actually getting physical with other people, pushing, hitting, slapping, throwing things or breaking things. And they may actually not appear in fully loss of control mode when these things are happening. These can be very deliberate actions, particularly with just picking something up and throwing it. They may not have led into the behavior at all. Again, going back to that proportional response. Something happens, they just react, and you may not see what's coming. What are some of the reasons behind this particular style? The need to show power. I am more important, I am more powerful, I am better than everybody else around me. I must be right, or I must be perceived as being right, even if subconsciously maybe I know I'm not right. I want everybody else to think that I am. Perhaps they don't know any other way to communicate their anger. We're going to go a little bit more in depth in this in a few slides, but just kind of keep in mind that things that are useful ways of communicating anger are learned skills. So if they haven't been taught those skills, they're not able to implement them, and as a result, they might just be acting out whatever it is that they know. Our third and final style is manage it. These are assertive rather than aggressive individuals. They consider the wants and the needs of others, but they also openly communicate their own wants and needs. They have directed anger, but it's not personal or based on an attack method. They focus on the thing or the behavior that's causing them to feel angry, not the other person who's involved in the situation. They remain calm and use I statements to communicate their needs and their feelings. Ultimately, these individuals understand that anger is normal and is a basic part of being human. They prefer to express their anger appropriately because they've learned over time that generally doing so results in their issue being solved. The age-old thought of you lure more flies with honey than you do with vinegar. I can communicate my wants and my needs, and I can be angry, but at the same time, I don't have to be aggressive or up in somebody's face or passive and let people walk all over me. I can get my needs met in a way that's effective for myself and whoever else is involved in the situation. Some degree of anger is going to be with us for all our lives. So almost a better question to look at rather than how often are you angry is my anger working for me? We know we're going to be angry. Sometimes it's often. But the question is really, how's that working? When the anger is mild, it dissipates quickly, it's not very frequent, and when it does happen, it's expressed in that assertive way we just talked about. This is considered quote-unquote normal. In these situations, the anger may be just a way of highlighting annoyance, and it can actually lead to problem resolution because people understand, hey, this is something that this person is very emotional about. They're tied to this, and so we need to kind of listen to what they're saying and figure out a solution. However, if your anger is more moderate to intense, if you're experiencing it frequently, if it sticks around and it's enduring and you're hanging on to it to the point where you're actually holding a grudge, or even worse, you're planning on getting even with somebody, and if you're expressing it in an aggressive verbal or physical way, then we've crossed that line into more dysfunctional anger. And not only are you placing yourself at risk for the negative relationship, health, and sometimes legal repercussions that are related to inappropriate anger expression, but it's just not a good way to go through life. People don't want to be around other people who have this strong anger response. It's often difficult to take an honest look at ourselves, but this is actually a key step in handling potentially anger-inducing situations. Identifying your hot-button issues, knowing how you react, and evaluating whether this is working for you or it's working against you will help in gaining self-control, and you will believe more strongly that you can handle a situation even when it is a hot-button issue. What's an example of this? I can give a personal example. There's a cartoon. I'm sure almost everybody out there has run across it at some point. It's a person sitting at a desk in front of a computer, and they're yelling to somebody off screen, I can't come to bed. Somebody is wrong on the internet. And I have been sent this cartoon more times than I can count because that is a hot-button issue for me. There are certain topics that get discussed frequently that I feel very strongly about, and I will get down the rabbit hole sometimes on the internet with in ways that don't work for me. And so I need to look at that, and I need to be self-aware enough to recognize that sometimes message boards and the comment sections of articles are not a good, healthy place for me to be. One way of assisting with the process of becoming more self-aware is keeping track of your anger response. And we have a slide up here that has a couple of squares on it, and you can use this particular table in a number of ways. It really comes down to what works for you. You can track up in the top box an incident that happened, and in the bottom box the way that you reacted. Or you can keep track of numbers of times that you had an anger response. You can put in one of the boxes, went to message board. And then you can put a little tick every time you had an anger response. Mine would be full of little tiny ticks. You can also use this to keep track of things like triggers, what your particular specific trigger is, and then in the next box you can use this sort of horizontally instead of vertically. And in the first box, for example, you would put the trigger. The next box would be the clue. What's telling you that you are being triggered? What are the physical responses? What are you thinking? What's going on internally that's leading you to know you're kind of getting into the danger zone at this point? The next box would be, what's your usual response? Now that you've been triggered and you know you're feeling these emotions, you're feeling this physical response, what would you normally do? It goes back to your anger style. Would you withdraw? Would you get aggressive? Would you try to work it out? And then for that final box, what's the consequence? If I withdraw, do I then start kicking myself that I didn't stand up for myself? If I get aggressive, do I start kicking myself because, man, I lost my cool again and I can't believe I did that? And these are completely anonymous people. Why do I care? If I decided to work through it, I may feel proud of myself that I had a good conversation over a topic that normally is very triggering for me. So there are many ways of keeping track of your anger responses. It really comes down to what's the best method for you. Three techniques to managing anger. The first is identify the mistaken beliefs that influence us to be angry in the first place. We talked early on about the cognitive response of anger. What are the thoughts that are fueling our frustration? Phrases that start with things like, I should have, they should have, I can't believe that. These are cyclical thoughts that just drive frustration and lead to anger. So what are the beliefs? The beliefs are, well, things should be fair. People should treat me respectfully. I shouldn't do this behavior because I'm above that. So be thinking about what are those mistaken beliefs that are leading to the anger. Identify the factors that prevent us from expressing anger appropriately. We mentioned this earlier on. I said we're going to be circling around back to it. If you don't have good role models of how to handle anger, if there are cultural or societal influences on you, if you grew up acting out your anger in a certain cultural way, if you saw all of those around you, your family members, your extended family members, behaving a certain way, then you may not have an understanding that that's probably not a healthy way to express your anger. If you're experiencing overwhelming emotions, you're caught up in the moment and you just can't see past the red, that can certainly prevent you from appropriately expressing your anger. Ultimately, learn appropriate ways to express our anger. We can certainly learn positive skills where we're not tied to our dysfunctional ways of expressing our anger. So you can use techniques such as asking for a timeout when you're overwhelmed. If you know you're caught up in the moment and there's really no good that's going to come out of it, just say, I need to walk away for a moment, I'll be right back. You can brainstorm solutions to the conflict. And as always, we're just going to keep repeating this, communicating in I statements. Consider changing patterns in how you deal with your anger or attempting to stop the anger response before it gets completely out of control. Delaying, such as counting to 10 or maybe even a little bit further to allow that arousal to dissipate. I mentioned just saying, I need a minute. I need to just walk away for a moment and I'll be back and we'll talk about this. Relaxation techniques like deep breathing or listening to calming music. Distractions such as working on puzzles, crossword puzzles, taking a walk, working out, doing yard work around the house, doing something incompatible with being angry or being aggressive. Snuggling with a puppy or a kitten. You can't be angry when you're snuggling with a puppy or a kitten. Kissing a loved one, watching a funny movie, helping someone in need. These will not only help take your mind off the situation, also delay the anger response, letting that arousal decrease, but it will also help just give you that time to be able to express your anger appropriately. How to calm an angry person. This can be difficult, especially if you're angry yourself or if you respond negatively or maybe even fearfully to other people's anger. And the first step, of course, remain calm yourself. Just because somebody else is starting to spin up just a little bit, that doesn't mean you need to meet them where they are in that moment. It doesn't mean that you need to get angry too. You want to know that you can be calm in the situation. Hear their point of view and watch them closely. And what you're watching for is their body language. You're listening to them communicating. It may be kind of loud communication, but they're at least communicating with you, and you're making sure, are they sitting closed off? Are their arms crossed and their legs are crossed? Are they stomping their foot? Are they giving off behavioral cues that they're either escalating or remaining in an escalated state? If you're then using your calming techniques and trying to meet that person where they are, we'll talk about those in just a second, and you see that they're starting to relax, maybe their shoulders are dropping a little bit, their arms go to the side, they uncross their legs, all of these things are showing you, hey, you're on the right track. Show empathy and find areas of agreement. Finding that common ground or an area of connection will reduce that angry person's feelings of being alone or being the victim of the situation. And it also helps in hearing them out by looking for that connection. You're having to listen very closely to what they're saying. Restate contents or feelings. I heard you say this. Is that what you're saying? Or, I heard you say this, and it sounds like that's making you feel this way. Is that right? It gives them a chance to say, no, that's not right, or, yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. You're really listening to me. Again, it goes back to that you're showing empathy and you're connecting. ultimately gently confront the individual. This is where those I statements are vital. You'll want to steer clear of phrases like calm down, because we know that while that may be very good advice in many situations, it also has a tendency to be used in ways that cause the person to feel like they're being denied the right to be upset, they're not allowed to be agitated or frustrated or frightened, and may actually lead to that circular argument of, I am calm. Why do you think I'm not calm? And then you say, well, but you're not calm. Well, yes, I am. We don't want that back and forth. We want to actually communicate effectively and give them the opportunity to start de-escalating. Dealing with anger, and this is your anger or somebody else's, it works really either way. Once again, listen attentively. You have two ears for a reason, and you want to be listening to what the person's saying instead of moving forward in the conversation and trying to imagine, well, I'm going to say this once they pause long enough that I can get that statement in there. You want to be in the moment and present and actually listening to what the person's saying, just like you would want somebody else sitting across from you doing the same thing. Analyze the problem, not the person. Get to the root of what is causing the issue so that you can then act on that, brainstorm some solutions, and potentially resolve it. At the same time, don't make promises you can't keep. If you've ever been on the phone with the cable company and you are trying to get your bill reduced but you still want the same package and that representative is promising you the moon, oh, I can increase the number of channels you're getting and decrease the amount that you're paying every month, but then it turns out that the representative can't actually give you that, now you're angry and disappointed. So we don't want to get into a cycle of promising things and then having to say, oh, well, whoops, I was actually wrong, I can't do that. Don't take anything that is said personally, but also don't allow ongoing personal attacks. Once, okay, we're going to let that go. We're going to let once slip by. Twice, that's when you're going to start asserting yourself and say something like, I want to help you, but I can't if you call me names. I can't if you get up in my face. The third time it happens, consider taking a time out. I really want to work through this with you, but I'm going to take a few minutes. I'll be right back. Stan, are there any questions from the audience today?
We do have a couple of questions that have come in. The first question reads, I tend to hold my anger in, and my husband is definitely a turn-it-loose kind of person. It's difficult to communicate with him when we're both angry because his outward anger makes me pull away even more. I'm not scared of him. I just want to be anywhere else when he's mad. How do I talk to him about this?
Mm-hmm. So it really sounds like you're caught in kind of a cycle. His anger is making you feel angry as well, which makes you withdraw because that's your style, which probably just feeds into his own anger, and y'all are basically going in this circle, feeding off of each other, and you're right that it's not an effective way to communicate with each other. I would recommend starting off by talking about it when you're not angry. Pick a time when you're both in a calm mood and use those I statements to identify not only your feelings, but also to in effect own your own role in the cycle. You're meeting each other in anger from your own styles, and that means that both of you are contributing to the situation. So a statement like, I find myself withdrawing from you when you're angry because it's tough for me to share my thoughts when you, and then fill in the blanks. When you yell, when you slam doors, when you hit a pillow, whatever the behavior is. And then you can say something like, I love you, reinforce that connection with him. I want us to communicate better, and I don't want to keep pulling away. So you're acknowledging, hey, I'm doing this. What do you think? And take that opportunity to brainstorm with him. It's likely he feels frustrated in the same way. Hey, every time I try to talk to her, she walks away, and it's really annoying. So I have to get louder because then she'll hear me. So it gives both of you a chance to have that communication, that dialogue back and forth. It doesn't need to be fixed overnight. That answer that he gives you and the response that you give him, it doesn't have to happen immediately. You can have several conversations about it. But if ultimately you're both kind of at a loss, you're not really sure how to fix it, of course there's always outside help, whether that's a pastor or a chaplain or a behavioral health counselor who can give you some tips and tools to be able to communicate with each other a little bit better.
Great. Next question reads, what phrases other than calm down would you recommend using to redirect an angry person?
I said we don't want to tell them calm down, but there are a number of other things that we can use, and it really depends on the situation, the people who are involved, the connection that you have. If it's a relative stranger or if it's a coworker, it's going to be a slightly different approach. If it's an adult or a child, you can use different methods as well. A key phrase, one of the number one responses is, I know you're upset. Is there anything I can do to help? So you're acknowledging their feelings. You're acknowledging they have the right to feel that way, and you're reaching out to them to find that common ground and find that ability to connect and fix whatever's going on. With children, for example, you can say, I know you're upset, so let me help you. And you can use relaxation techniques with them. You can say, if it's a child who likes to get out some of their frustration and their anger in a physical way, you can say, let's run in place really, really fast for 10 seconds. And then have them do a deep breathing exercise. Or you can have them squeeze your hands really, really tightly for 5 seconds and then do a deep breathing exercise. So you're connecting with them physically, you're touching them and giving them that physical reassurance, and also giving them an outlet and a way to take a few moments. You're doing that delay technique and letting that adrenaline sort of dissipate a little bit so that you can help them start using their words. I think this is something we can handle together. That's a good one. If, much like the previous question, if you can own a piece of the conflict and you can acknowledge that and consider apologizing, don't apologize just to calm the person down, but definitely take the opportunity to own your piece of it and apologize. And of course, there's always the tried and true technique of not responding at all, just listening attentively, making affirming noises and affirming body language, nodding your head, and encouraging them to go on. Sometimes you don't even need to tell them to calm down. They'll wind themselves down themselves.
Okay, next question is, I'm a loud person in general. So when I get into an argument or a discussion, it seems like I'm angry, but I'm really not. What can I do to make the person feel like I'm not really that mad?
That's very common. That's a very common problem, and once again, it will depend on your connection with that person. If you can make a little bit of a joke about it, and it's somebody that you have that connection with, and you can make it into a funny sort of thing. Hey, I recognize that, man, I sound angry, but I'm just kind of loud. You know me. I'm just kind of boisterous. Acknowledge, even with somebody you don't have a good connection with, you can just acknowledge, my style of communication is, it tends to be loud. Please let me know if I need to tone it down a little bit. Because sometimes you may not, in the moment, you may not realize how loud you're getting. By giving the other person permission to say, you're getting a little loud, could you indoor voice for me, please? It gives them the opportunity to put a pause in there and dial things down a little bit from their end. Because you may be dealing with people who don't mind, or people who do mind. And by giving them that little bit of control, it will improve communication. If it's something that ultimately bothers you, then you can work on it, either on your own or with close friends. Hey, I need you to keep an eye on me and tell me when I'm doing this so I can see how it's working. Or working with somebody in the professional field who can tone you down a little bit in those situations. We don't want you to lose your boisterousness or your excited voice. We just want to make sure that it's an appropriate response for the situation.
Great, thanks. There are no other questions that have come in at this time. So, Devin Sheehan, I would like to thank you for sharing your invaluable experience and expertise. I would also like to thank our attendees for participating in today's webinar. And if you find yourself having questions after the webinar is over, please email moswebinars@militaryOneSource.com, and I'll send the questions over to our presenter, and we'll get an answer back to you as quickly as we can. This concludes today's webinar on anger management. Thank you all for attending, and have a great day.